Want to know what made an entire room of elite Navy SEALs fall completely silent? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. This is a story you'll remember long after the sound fades. She was just patching up a concrete wall. No name tag, no rank, just another civilian tech in cargo trousers. Quiet, overlooked, easy to ignore. Until one afternoon, everything changed. Layla Henning had always preferred it that way. She wasn't here to stand out. In fact, she'd built an entire career on the art of invisibility. People didn't notice her, and that suited her just fine. But today was different. It was a regular afternoon at the Naval Training Facility. The familiar sounds of rifles cracking through the air, the sharp ping of brass hitting the floor, and the occasional shout of an instructor filled the air. The SEALs, focused as always, moved through their drills with precision. For most, this was just another day at the range, another routine in a life where perfection was the expectation. Layla worked along the back wall, her gloved hands moving in steady rhythm, spreading polymer compound into cracks that had been caused by the force of repeated concussion rounds. Her gray t-shirt was already damp from the effort, but she kept her focus. The task was simple enough, but necessary. Half-hearted repairs never held up. She had learned that the hard way years ago. Yet, as she smoothed the compound into the cracks, a subtle shift occurred in the room. It was almost imperceptible, but something in the air changed. One of the Navy SEALs, who had been watching her from a distance, suddenly moved closer. Without a word, he handed her his rifle, then took a step back. It was a gesture of trust, of respect, and in that moment, the entire room seemed to stop breathing. Layla Henning was the last person you'd notice in a room full of Navy SEALs. She wasn't here to impress, and that was exactly how she preferred it. While the operators around her were finely tuned machines, their every movement purposeful and aggressive, Layla moved with the calm of someone who had mastered the art of patience. To them, she was just a repair tech, someone who fixed the walls, maintained the equipment, and disappeared before anyone had a chance to ask questions. Her job title was simple enough: Facility Repair Level C, the kind of ID that made you invisible to those who had more important things on their minds. She wore no rank, no medals, and didn't expect to be noticed. The SEALs, busy with their drills, rarely spared her a second glance. She worked quietly in the background, her canvas tool bag always within arm's reach, filled with the tools that kept the training facility running smoothly. Her gloved hands moved with quiet efficiency as she patched up the range walls, filling cracks left by the repeated impact of concussion rounds. Each stroke of her trowel was a reflection of her meticulous nature. Half-hearted fixes were unacceptable in her world. She didn't cut corners. She'd learned long ago that the work spoke for itself. If she did it well enough, no one would question her methods. If she did it poorly, the cracks would reappear, and she'd have to start all over again. Her attention to detail was what set her apart from others who saw the job as just another task. To her, it was an art, one that required focus, precision, and a deep understanding of how the walls and systems around her operated. Today, though, something was different. For the first time, she felt the weight of the eyes on her. She'd gotten used to being invisible, to blending into the background. But now, something in the air had shifted. The subtle tension that had been building in the room was palpable. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. One of the SEALs had noticed her. Layla had never been one to seek attention, and that's exactly how she preferred it. But it didn't take long for the whispers to start. The SEALs, who had spent years honing their bodies and skills, weren't accustomed to seeing someone like Layla working silently in the background. They were used to being the best at everything they did, whether it was clearing rooms, handling weapons, or performing complex maneuvers. Yet here she was, a technician, blending in, moving with a quiet confidence that they couldn't quite place. Some of the younger SEALs, still eager to prove themselves, whispered behind her back. They were confident in their skills, but they underestimated her, believing that someone like Layla was simply a part of the background, a cog in the machine. She probably used to be a gym teacher. One of them laughed, his voice carrying across the range. Another chimed in. Bet she coached softball. Their dismissive comments barely registered with Layla, who kept her focus on the task at hand. She had heard worse, and from more experienced men than these. The loudest voices were often the ones with the most to prove. But as the hours passed and the SEALs continued with their drills, something started to change. Their casual chatter faded into the background as Layla's movements caught their attention. It wasn't the fact that she was working. It was the way she worked. Every tool she touched, every crack she filled, was done with an unmatched precision that made even the most experienced operators pause and look twice. She was methodical, efficient, and more importantly, she was good at what she did. The same focus that the SEALs applied to their weapons training, Layla applied to the walls around her. As her gloved hands spread the polymer compound into the cracks, she seemed to be in her own world, completely detached from the noise and chaos surrounding her. But her work had a rhythm, a quiet intensity, and it didn't take long before a few of the more observant SEALs started to watch her with a new interest. One of them, a young operator who had been particularly vocal about Layla's presence, was the first to notice the subtle changes. He had tossed his pistol carelessly onto the crate near her workstation earlier that day. But when he looked over now, he saw that something had changed. Layla had noticed the damage to the weapon, something he hadn't even seen. It was only a small issue, but the way she examined it, so quietly, so precisely, made him stop. She wasn't just fixing a crack in a wall. She was fixing something much deeper, and she had no intention of cutting corners. She was good, too good. The morning started like any other at the training facility, with the same sharp sounds of live fire echoing down the range. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder, the scent of burning metal mingling with the humid heat of the base. Layla arrived early, just as she always did, walking through the maintenance entrance with a coffee that had gone cold on her commute. She never minded arriving before the official start time. Fewer people meant fewer questions, and more time to focus on the work that needed doing. Today, it was the target reset system in Bay 2. A simple enough job on the surface, just another malfunctioning mechanism that had been ignored by everyone else. But Layla wasn't everyone else. She didn't work around problems. She fixed them. She had been crawling through the service access for about an hour, working on the hydraulic pistons and steel cables that powered the system, when she heard the voices. The same group of junior SEALs from the day before were hanging around, laughing quietly among themselves. Their conversation floated over the sounds of drills, but this time, their words were a bit louder, a bit more pointed. "What's she doing now?" one of them asked, his voice filled with sarcasm. "Probably making it worse," another replied with a chuckle. "You want to bet she's here because somebody's cousin needed a favor?" The last comment was especially dismissive, as if Layla was just some outsider who didn't belong. Layla ignored them, focusing on the task at hand. She had heard worse from better men than these. Their words didn't bother her anymore. She had learned long ago that the loudest voices usually had the least to offer. And these guys? They were no different. They couldn't see beyond their own egos, and they didn't understand the value of quiet competence. But as Layla continued to work, something caught her eye. The same group of SEALs had thrown a pistol onto the metal crate nearest her workstation earlier. At first, she had dismissed it as careless behavior. But now, as her eyes caught the reflection in her safety glasses, she saw the problem. The pistol wasn't just dropped, it was damaged. The slide was catching, the magazine well stressed. It was an issue that, with the right tools and a bit of time, she could fix in about 3 minutes. It wasn't her job to repair weapons today. But that didn't matter to Layla. If something was broken, she fixed it. No questions asked. The next morning, the sounds of the base were the same. Rifles cracking, instructors barking commands, the constant rhythm of the training facility. But for some reason, today felt different. The young SEALs, still caught in the rhythm of their daily drills, were acting a little quieter than usual. They hadn't forgotten about Layla, but something had shifted. The dismissiveness that had marked their earlier interactions had all but disappeared. Layla, as usual, had arrived early, her tool bag in hand, her coffee now long forgotten. The target reset system had malfunctioned again, and she was determined to make it work once and for all. Everyone else had simply worked around the problem, but not Layla. She wasn't the type to ignore issues that could compromise the mission. The target system was far more complex than it appeared. Hydraulic pistons, steel cables, and electronic sensors all working in unison. Any misalignment could throw the entire system off. She'd been crawling around in the service access for nearly an hour, adjusting components with a kind of precision that only someone who truly understood the system could manage. Her tools were far from standard issue. Custom torque drivers, precision files, measurement instruments that many at the base wouldn't even recognize. These weren't tools you found in the standard maintenance kits. They were tools that came from years of experience, from working on equipment that demanded more than just good enough. 20 minutes later, Layla triggered the test sequence. The system hummed to life, running smoother than it had in months. The targets moved with a fluidity that made the instructor stop mid-sentence, his eyes wide in disbelief. For the first time in what felt like forever, the target reset system was working perfectly. Layla packed up her tools with the same care and attention she had used to unpack them. Each piece was carefully stored in its place, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. To her, it was just another job well done. But the SEALs weren't oblivious anymore. They watched in silence, their earlier mockery replaced by something else. The respect was subtle at first, a shift in posture, a nod of acknowledgement. But for the first time, Layla felt it. She wasn't invisible anymore. She had earned something she never sought, their respect. As she zipped up her tool roll and moved to leave, she saw the same group of junior SEALs standing near the crate where the pistol from the day before still lay. They were watching her carefully now, their expressions a mix of surprise and skepticism. Layla didn't acknowledge them. She didn't need to. She had already done the work that mattered. The SEALs had underestimated her before, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. One of the SEALs muttered under his breath, "Even a broken clock is right twice a day." Layla didn't stop, didn't turn around. She had heard it all before. Instead, she moved towards the crate, where the damaged pistol still lay. Her fingers traced the barrel, moving with deliberate care. This wasn't curiosity, it was recognition. She knew exactly what was wrong with the weapon. She'd seen this before. She didn't need to look up, didn't need to say anything. Her hands worked with the familiarity of someone who had repaired more weapons than most had fired. It wasn't her job today to fix this weapon, but she would. It wasn't about the job title. It was about competence. And in the world she inhabited, competence spoke louder than any title ever could. The following days passed in a quiet rhythm, the kind that came after something had shifted in the air. The SEALs continued their training, their focus unwavering, but something had changed. Layla, once just the woman who patched the walls, had become something more. She didn't need to say a word. The respect had settled into the space around her like a quiet storm. One afternoon, after the SEALs returned from a grueling training exercise, Layla was back at her workstation, as usual. Her gloves were on. Her tools were laid out with methodical care. The range was quieter now, the noise from the day's drills fading into the background. She was working on a ventilation intake system, adjusting components with a precision that suggested an understanding few could match. The door to the armory opened, and in walked Petty Officer First Class Jack Rains. The team's leader was no stranger to the maintenance areas, but today he was different. His movements were purposeful, the weight of his stride marking an unspoken challenge. Without a word, he walked up to Isla's workstation, his 17 Malawian kwachas slung over his shoulder. He didn't hesitate. He laid the rifle gently on her workbench, the action smooth, deliberate. The rest of the team watched from a distance, their eyes narrowed with curiosity. This wasn't just another weapon repair. This was a test. A real one. Rains didn't speak. He didn't need to. The rifle, which had been giving him trouble, now sat in front of Isla, and all eyes were on her. The room had gone silent, the usual banter replaced by an intensity that only the SEALs understood. They all knew what was at stake here. Precision was everything. Isla looked at the rifle, her hands already moving. She didn't hesitate. She picked it up with the care of someone who understood the weapon's history. The small marks on the barrel, the way the stock had been worn down from countless missions. It was a rifle that had seen action, and now it needed someone who knew exactly how to fix it. Isla's hands moved with the fluid precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times. The rifle lay on her workbench, its issues clear to her from the moment she touched it. The misalignment in the barrel extension was subtle, but she could feel it. Her fingers worked quickly, but not hurriedly, adjusting the rifle's components with a calm, practiced precision that spoke volumes about her skill. The room remained silent, the only sound the soft clicks of the rifle's parts as Isla disassembled and reassembled them with methodical care. Rains watched intently, his team following suit. There was no need for words. Isla's work spoke for itself. She didn't need to explain what she was doing, didn't need to impress anyone with her knowledge. The SEALs could see it in her movements, the quiet confidence, the intimate understanding of the weapon in her hands. She wasn't just fixing the rifle, she was bringing it back to life. As the final piece clicked into place, Isla stepped back, wiping her hands on her gloves. She didn't look up immediately. The silence in the room was thick, almost tangible, as everyone waited for Rains to make the next move. He picked up the rifle, checked the action, and shouldered it. His face remained stoic, but there was something in his eyes now, something different. He aimed at a target across the bay, dry-fired, and smiled. The first genuine smile Isla had seen from him. "Outstanding," he said simply, his voice low but filled with respect. The rifle was fixed, and with it, the unspoken acknowledgement that Isla had earned her place among the best. The room finally exhaled. Trust had been given, and it had been earned. Word spread quickly through the base, as it always did. It wasn't loud, but it was persistent, like a whisper carried through the ranks, gaining momentum with each passing hour. "She fixed Rain's pistol," they said. "Did you see how she handled that bolt group?" Isla hadn't asked for the attention. She didn't need it. In her world, it was the work that mattered. She kept her head down, focused on the task at hand, and did it better than anyone else. She wasn't looking for recognition, but it came all the same. The respect was quiet, like a deep current running through the base. Days passed, and things settled into a new normal. SEALs who had once dismissed Isla now quietly placed their broken rifles and pistols near her workstation, trusting her to make them run like new again. No fanfare, no requests, just trust that had to be earned, and in Isla's case, was never asked for. But as the base continued its relentless cycle of training and preparation, one thing was clear. Layla Henning had found her place in a world where only the strongest survive. And in the silence of her work, she was proving that sometimes the most important job of all is the one nobody notices.